Hello, 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 everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. I'm excited to be back for another week, another Whip Wednesday. Let me switch over the screen already. Let's do this one first. Have a little casual chat. Starting a little bit earlier than usual, just because I want to kind of groove, talk to people a little bit. Yeah, but I hope that everyone is doing well. And I hope that my chat is working as well. But we'll figure out as we go along, shall we? Let's see. What do I have for you today? So today we have 2, 4, 6. I think we have like 8 people that we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be diving into that in just a little bit. Yeah, so 8 people. So pretty relaxed session for this time around. We can take like a little bit more time with everything. I do want to give you like an update on what's happening on the back end. Since this year, we've done. I've been trying to like reorganize like the team and kind of bring the team like a little bit closer together, because before that it was kind of, we had a team at a certain point, we separated a little bit, and now we have different people working here and there. So what I'm trying to do right now is kind of bring the team more together and also like get more stuff into the works for us in the future as well. One thing is BE Unwrapped. So this monthly event where I host basically a Q&A session. We're kind of going to change and do some changes to the formula a little bit. It's still going to be a Q&A session, but we're going to attach like a little lesson to it as well. So we currently have Sia on board. Most of you that are familiar with being in the community for quite a while have probably interacted with Sia in some way or another. She's currently helping me with doing a bunch of research, picking the topics. There's a lot of conversation going on there. And for the first one, we're going to be talking about pre-production stage of an environment. We're going to find like a more sexy name, right, than the pre-production stage, because it sounds so like dry and barren. But I do want to give like an opportunity for people to basically ask their own questions. So if you ever feel like you kind of got stuck between like picking a concept or like building your own thing, or how to even come up with a concept yourself, or anything sort of to do with that range of topics, I want to add a questionnaire in the chat that everyone can access. So anyone can add their questions in there. And then, yeah, basically, oh, let me see. Oh no, I don't think the chat works on this one. Dang it. Let me see. Let me see if I can fix that. But yeah, basically that's an open questionnaire for if people want to submit a question. And what will happen is during that session, we will first have like a little lesson. So I will take you through like some topics, some ideas, like some of my recommendations that I would do on a topic, and then we can go into the Q&A afterwards as well, and kind of like have best of both worlds. Because I don't want it to just be like a Q&A. So that's the way that we're gonna experiment. We're gonna have some fun with the project. So we're gonna see how that turns out. Secondly, there was some like it's a minor change, so you in the community won't necessarily see an effect. But I've been told, I'm not gonna name names, but I've been told by someone on the team that my social media posts, they kind of read like a scam or AI. So we're gonna be fixing that. We're gonna be fixing that. We're gonna do some changes in the way that like the social media stuff sounds. And then also that means that Karim, he's gonna be in charge of that. So he's gonna be moving on to like social media stuff, like making us sound better and like helping us basically like market ourselves better as well. So that's gonna be cool. Which also means that I'll be moving back to the workshops as well. So I'm currently talking to like a bunch of people, organizing like the next round of workshops. Karim is still doing that as well. So Karim is still involved. But when he finished this conversation, then hopefully we'll have those people on as well. And then he'll move off to doing the social media stuff. Hello, Sheila. Hello, Alex. Hello, Joe. Hold on. Let me see if I can get like the chat on here. we're gonna be jumping around for a little bit. Apologies for that. Where is the start? Here we go. See, because we have this chat here, I'm just gonna steal it. And I do want to have it on here as well. There we go. Beautiful. Hey, there we go. We got the beautiful chat. Love it. Oh, that's so much better. So, couple of questions here. Hey Tim, is this a base tier of membership? Yeah. So the BE and Wrapped. Oh yeah, maybe what we'll do. Something that I kind of want to experiment with as well is I want to have them live as well. So what it basically comes down to is I'll make a presentation. I'll basically try to make it into like a condensed lesson, right? So that we have like an interesting lesson that people can engage with, and then a Q&A afterwards as well. The original idea was that the BE and Wrapped was like exclusive to the community. I don't think that really works. So what we'll do instead is I'm gonna play around with the stuff that we put out there, which means with the BE and Wrapped, we're gonna try to turn it into like more of a lesson and Q&As kind of thing. That's what we're gonna trying, and we'll see how that does. I think honestly, it sounds better. We had that feedback in the past where people kind of wanted to see like a more focused approach to what we did, especially with the Q&A sessions. So I think that would be good. Hello, designer. Hello, Sheila. Lovely to see you both here. Hope you both are doing well. Joe is here as well. Frida, Snowbat, Joe. Lovely to see you all. Hope you're all doing well. The other question here is from Alex. Is a 2024 handbook out? No, it is here. Well, kind of depends on how do you define here. So, this thing is basically like all these post-its and like all the things I've basically annotated, like all the pages. I've basically gone through with like a bunch of markers, decided which ones we're gonna keep and which ones I'm gonna cut. So that is basically still in the stage where you probably saw it last. So nothing has really happened there, which it is kind of sad. But yeah, I think the priority needs to be on the other stuff that we're doing now, because the book, like you're saying, Alex, it's out there, right? And the changes that I'm going to do in this format is mostly just making it printable, honestly. And like redoing like a whole bunch of mistakes and potentially adding like a couple new tips and artist interviews, right? Like those are the things that I want to do. But the core content is not going to change. So the one that you're reading right now is still relevant. Can we have a letter book? Yeah, if you make it yourself, you can have everything. I haven't even printed the first one yet, so that's something that we'll have to explore. Because, yeah, it's the first time ever that we're doing, well, that I'm doing something printed, right? I mean, I do have some previous experience because this was basically why I went to college. So in college, I was doing like a lot of advertisement, a lot of book printing, all that kind of stuff. We'll see. You're talking about the limited edition. I think the whole book is going to be limited edition regardless, because it's not going to be in like print forever the way that I'm currently thinking about it. It's just going to be a limited supply of the amount of stuff that we're going to print. And then once that runs out, if there's enough interest, maybe we'll do like a reprint. Otherwise, probably won't do it. But yeah, that basically, thanks for bringing that up, by the way. I mean, that basically hasn't made like any traction. So yeah, it's kind of on the back burner for now. The following steps would basically be all the notes and all the adjustments that I've done now need to be transferred to digital. And then I need to add some additional content as well. I have like a list of like 10 pages that I want to add because of topics that were missing. And then do some filler pages as well, because I do want to have like some artist interviews or something like that to like spice things up a little bit. So it wouldn't necessarily take too long, but the main focus right now is on the content that we're doing now, right? So like the content that's already running with Wednesday, and also BE Unwrapped and the portfolio reviews, and also a big focus for us right now is the academy, stuff. That is going to be like a big undertaking. We're making some really good progress. So Sunny has been doing like a great job in basically what we're trying to work towards right now is one lesson that is like fully edited. We're going to put that on the website, and we're going to do like a very early test, just to see if the formula works well, and then get some early feedback for people. But we have a lot of content already like planned out, and we expect a release date like somewhere in the middle of the year, something like that. Like an early test where people can go through the beginning all the way towards the end of like the environment art track. So it would be a single track, but that is the goal for like the middle of the year, something like that. We'll see. So yeah, in these chats, I'll try to be more open as well. I feel like I haven't really been that open in the past couple months. So whenever I'll have like little updates, or I'll give you like a little progress updates, or maybe little snippets, sneak peeks, you know, it would be fun. Fails, the G Art is staying here a little bit to listen. Hey, welcome. And also Bulborb, good to see you back. Hope you're having a good day. Yeah, the handbook is amazing. Oh, thanks so much for saying so, Alex. I feel like a lot of people have really gotten a lot of benefit out of it, even though I do say so myself. It's kind of nice to hear like these pockets of feedback from people. And I'm talking about like years down the line, right? Where they say like, hey, the handbook was amazing. It helped me do this, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of nice to kind of hear like those little bits of feedback. So appreciate it. Cool. That's not everything we wanted to talk about today, because we do have some work to look at as well. So in the meantime, for people that are new as well, feel free to ask questions while I will be talking over like the feedback. So yeah, if you have any questions about game development, if you have anything to ask about like environment art, I will gladly help you out as well during the session. Because yeah, I kind of keep forgetting to like introduce myself for new people as well, but I'm an environment artist in the industry myself as well. So be happy to help you achieve the same thing. Let's see. We're going to switch over to this one. We're going to be looking at some feedback. Hello, Guillaume. Good to see you here. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great day. Let's see. I am going to hop into the Discord as well. So if you are taking part in Whip Wednesday today and you're a part of our community, you can join me on stage if you want to. I'm going to call it live feedback stage. Not going to let everyone know. I'm just going to jump in here. It might get a little bit confusing if you have like the stream on one side and like me on the other end. But yeah. If you do want to participate, feel free to jump in, raise your hand, and then as soon as you raise your hand, I'll bring you up to the stage as well. First one for today is Dat. Let's have a look.
Hello.
Hello, Dat. Welcome back. Good to hear you. How are you doing?
Good. Pretty good. I didn't have as much time to work on this project this week, but
yeah,
feeling good still.
Okay, so give me an idea of what happened. You worked mostly on the tree, right?
Yeah, so I was just experimenting with the shape. I wanted to basically make a really unique looking tree, and I found a lot of references of like juniper bonsais with deadwood, and I wanted to try to replicate that shape. So right now it's just one texture, so there's no like deadwood or variation of textures quite yet, but I basically ended up with this shape and thought it was like a good base to work off of for the next few days.
Okay. And what can I help you with then?
I guess, what are your thoughts on the shape, I guess?
The shape of the tree, or like the shape with of like the full tree with like the canopy and like all the leaves included in it as well.
Uh, I guess just the shape of the full tree, I guess.
Okay. I was just gonna say that like it's kind of missing that like stereotypical bonsai shape, right? Where you kind of have like these little sections that come out and then they create like these like platforms, right? So that
Yeah.
like very stereotypical like bonsai shape that still needs to be like included, and that is mostly down to like the branches that you add on top of the main tree, right? And just having like a couple of them, because now it kind of, the trunk itself kind of has like the curviness and sort of like the wild shape that you would expect from the like a bonsai. But then the leaves themselves and the canopies like could still need some, they still need some work to kind of make it feel like it's a bonsai tree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's the main thing, man. Otherwise,
Alright.
I think you're on pretty good track. I think it looks like pretty sweet as well. Just in terms
Thank
of
you.
like a nice visual. Once you get that like bonsai shape in there, it's gonna look really good, because that will also make it feel more unique, right? In terms of like silhouette, and it's gonna be more captivating and different compared to like all the other trees that you have down there as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing with bonsai, a lot of them have like a very controlled canopy. Should I try to aim for something like that? To, like
Oh yeah.
separate it from like the other trees in the area?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was referring to, right? Like usually, like they get like this, like you said, very controlled canopy. That's because like you got to be very careful with like how you manicure them, and like you got to snip like the correct leaves and all that kind of stuff with bonsais, right?
Yeah.
So I would kind of look at this as like this is a huge bonsai tree, and there's probably like, I don't know, 10 to 100 people working on this bonsai tree to keep it alive, right? Or like to keep it like well manicured and stuff. And then
Yeah, yeah.
you can kind of use that as a storytelling element as well, where the city around it is there to like support this like sacred tree, right? Kind of
Yeah, yeah.
link how manicured it is to like the surrounding area.
Alright, cool. And I think that's honestly all I have to ask about for this week.
Nice. Yeah, no. Love it. Thanks for popping in as well. Um
Thanks for the feedback.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, be careful. Just a little warning. Just be careful with like the timeline, right? Because you had last week we spoke about like 3 months, I think, right?
Yeah.
So do keep that in mind, because it's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
Cool. We there were some people in the chat saying that Sia, for example, saying that it's looking phenomenal though. The large tree is so striking. And Vale is also saying that the tree bark texture looks sweet already. So yeah,
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
well done, that.
Alright,
Great job.
cool. Cool. I'll let the next person have their turn.
Awesome. Thank you for popping in, that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, that. So yeah, let me just finish up my notes here. So maintained by the village surrounding it, right? The village around it. I think that could be cool, right? Like the more manicured you make it, the more it kind of feels like, oh, this is like a place that's basically devoted, like the city is basically devoted to the tree, right? Could be like a nice way of looking at it. So yeah, getting those like nice platform shapes in there, it's gonna be cool. Vale is asking 3 months for the whole scene. Yeah, I mean it is doable. It just kind of depends on how you curate what you're gonna be showing off, right? Like usually that's you can do a lot with like a visual art in terms of like limiting the amount of stuff that you see, and then being really smart with what you do in the areas that you can see. So focusing on one camera angle, that is something that we talked about like last week as well. That is really helpful just by itself, because then you can really make sure that like this one camera looks really good. But yeah, there's so many tricks. There's so many things that you can do to basically work smarter, not harder, right? But yeah. This is gonna look nice. We're gonna have like all these like different platforms kind of shaping the whole tree. It's gonna look good. Yep. Cool stuff. Nice. Let's see. Let's see if we have someone else who wants to come up. If you are taking part and you are from the community, feel free to jump into the chat on Discord. It's not mandatory, so we can just move on to the next person as well. It is quite a big piece. Yeah, for sure. It's impressive. Yeah. That's why I gave like the very subtle warning of like, hey, basically the last week we looked at it, like you only had a little bit of time to work on the tree. That's like a week that's gone, right? And you only have like 12 of them left. So like 1/12 of the time is gone. I'm sure that people have enough pressure already, but it's something to keep in mind. Usually also what happens, and this is very common, we organize some of these big challenges and the same thing happens in those big challenges as well. The same thing happens in production environments too, is that the closer you get to the deadline, the more work gets done. It is pretty simple. So yeah, I'm expecting the same thing to happen here as well. Like once the pressure gets cooking, that's when stuff comes together like really quickly. Cool. Let's jump on to the next person. We got Mekval on the screen. So let's have a look at Mekval's work. Mekval was working on tools basically. So a tool to generate like all these buildings, like with embedded like rooms, with fake interior cube maps, and now he's working on the shutters. So let's see, Mekval is saying, been making some progress on the cube maps, adding in the shutter feature to help with, as well as some texture for the glass. Let's see, as for the feedback, do the shutters currently work, or do I need to make some more so that I don't need to stretch them for the larger windows? The bottom auto adjusts so it doesn't cut off. What do you mean? Is that like a texture? Let's see. Do I need to make some more so that I don't stretch them for larger windows? Oh, I see. Yeah, I see what you mean. So if you have like a bigger window, yeah, you would need to stretch them up to fit that window size, right? You can stretch them, but you are gonna have to limit the amount of stretching that can be done and then do something smarter if it gets bigger than that stretching, right? So this is where we go into like the pit of making a good tool, because let's say I'm using this tool and I want to make a window that you didn't anticipate. How are you going to deal with that, right? So one of the things that you could potentially do is, let's say from, usually this is a rough guideline, right? This is something that I just have in my head. There's no rules for this necessarily. It kind of depends on every production environment, but 25% up and down is what you can do before you start introducing like a lot of stretching, and you can see that the textile density is not going to hold up, right? So in this case, like this rule of 25 down, you can kind of build that into the tool. So if something scales up, let's say 40%, then it's your job in the tool. Well, you have a choice, right? Like either you build something for it, that's like option 1, or you limit the scale. So if someone wants to scale to 40%, you can say like, not possible, it's going to be reverted back to 25%, right? That's one option. You can also do the other option of, hey, if you scale up to like 40%, it's going to have like 2 rows of shutters that are going to have like a beam in between them, and they will basically be open at like different heights, right? So you can kind of build something around that if you wanted to. I'm gonna leave that up to you. This is basically what building a tool comes down like, right? Is building it, ideally having someone test it, and then go back to hear what their feedback was about, right? Because we can, as I don't really build like a lot of tools myself, but I've seen this a lot in, well, as a user of tools. Sometimes tools are built with like specific purpose in mind, and then we as artists we're really creative, so then we break tools, and then we try to give like feedback to make the tool better, right? Very common like feedback loop that happens there. So that's something to think about. You can scale them up and down by like 20%, 25%, let's say. There is some flexibility there. The second question is, does the glass dirt look all right around the edges? Honestly, I can't see it. Is that just like the darkening that happens? But this is like very difficult to see. Let's see. Let's increase the size. Yeah, you kind of have some scratches here, I'm guessing, right? But it's really not visible. But this kind of stuff depends on the viewing angle and what you're using for reflections, right? If you just use, I mean, in this case, I think you're just using a dark environment with a couple of lights in it. It's not going to have any information to reflect upon, right? So I would test this into like an environment with like an HDRI map, and then have like a studio HDRI, and then you can test it with that. Or maybe not a studio, like have an environment in there. So on the number 2, if the dirt works, I would say test with an HDRI map. Just because, yeah, if I can't read, yeah, if I can't read like the reflections, that is, it's not necessarily to like indicate there's something wrong with the shader. It's just nothing's being reflected because you don't have an environment, right? So that would be good to test it. You're in chat already. Hopefully I can get some reflections for next week. Yeah, sounds good. And then the third one is any general thoughts on additions to the scene? Does the water look okay? It's slightly tweaked Unreal Engine default water, and how are the bridges and the structures in the back? I honestly, they're all right. I would try to hide them as much as possible. Unless that is part of the tool, which I don't think it is, I would just try to hide them as much as possible. Like, really just like fog everything up. Have like a bunch of fog maybe like down at the water. The water looks decent, right? Like maybe the normal map kind of looks like really repetitive, so finding a way to break that up. But yeah, basically try to cover. Yeah, it's just filler stuff. That's what I mean, right? Like, that's what I mean. So if you can cover it up more, because I know that it's going to be filler stuff anyway, it doesn't matter. Shazar is asking, with art pieces like these, is there something technical you're wanting to show with the scale? Prove you can do? Oh, I see what you're asking. So the way that we discussed it, just to give some context here, the way that we discussed it is that the size of it, this is basically based on an image from Cyberpunk, right? It would basically just be like promotional material, right? To showcase that like, hey, this is a tool, I've built it in this way, and this is like the end result of what it can look like, just as like a marketing thing. And yeah, like it's kind of hitting like both nails on the head, right? It's also showcasing that like, hey, if you want to build like an actual thing, what an artist would also do in this case, like here's an example, right? Here's what I built with the tool. But that's a good question. I think that's a great question to ask, especially when you want to do like a multiple renders, because you don't necessarily want to do multiple renders of the same environment if you're trying to prove the usefulness of a tool, right? Because then you kind of want to show off like, hey, I can do like a massive mega city, but I can also do just like a normal street somewhere in the suburbs, right? And the tool basically has like parameters that you can tweak to kind of hit like both of those at the same time, depending on if the tool can, right? But that's a great question though. But that's what I would do. Like with the background, if it's just filler stuff, like try to cover it up, make it atmospheric, kind of, I don't know, kind of leave it to the background. Not overly concerned about that. Because the focus needs to be on the tool anyway, right? So I'm expecting, currently what is happening is that a lot of the attention goes here, right? Because that's the brightest spot in the scene. You will have to find a way, and the concept has a way of doing that themselves as well, is you kind of want to shift the focus to the most important stuff down here, right? You kind of want to draw the attention to like all these cool buildings that you've created with the tool. So that would be something to think about as well, just in terms of like the composition of the scene. Yeah. Good going, McFal. Thank you so much for sharing your work again for another week. Always cool to see these little updates. Bump the water reflections to max so I can reduce it. I don't think you necessarily need to reduce it. I think it's more of a case of layering it up with atmospherics and all that kind of stuff, and then see if at that point you still need to reduce it. Because right now it wouldn't really make a lot of sense to start like fine-tuning a lot of stuff already, because because we're not at the final stages yet, right? Where we can start tweaking things to like match each other like a little bit better. So I would kind of wait around, kind of do that at like a later stage as well. Nice one though. Thanks again for sharing, and yeah, glad to be of help. For people that might be new to this formula, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I myself am like a senior environment artist with almost 10 years in the games industry. So if you want to ask questions, feel free to ask anything you want, and we'll see if we can find a spot to cover it as well, like in between all the feedback. McFall is saying you need to get the billboards. Oh, need to get some billboards and more lights on the buildings. Yeah. In terms of like what we need to add to this is just focus on the stuff that's going to be closest to the camera, right? So stuff on the rooftops, billboards, I don't know, cool light displays or LED displays or whatever you want to do there, right? Cool. We'll thumbnail them. I'm not gonna lie, I just threw that thumbnail in because it was one that I had like lying around. But thank you, Hudson. I appreciate it. Just ignore that I said that. Effective atmospherics, yeah, that's gonna really push this to like the next level. You can cover up so much with like effective like volumetric fog and all that kind of stuff. This is gonna look good. Because at that point, like if you have like volumetric fogs and you just have cubes with like fake lights on with like emissive like cubes on top of them, those are cars in the distance, right? Like you're not gonna notice that. No way. Cool. Let's keep it moving on. So next person is Tia. Anyway, I got engaged last week. Oh shit. Congratulations, Hudson. That is awesome. Congratulations to you both. That is amazing. I hope you're both having a good time. Enjoy all the planning for the wedding and stuff too. It's gonna be great. Okay, let's see. I just shoved these images like in the corner somehow. Let me rearrange them really quickly. But a cool looking little concept over here. Great choice, first of all. Let's see. Let's see what Sia has to say in her work in progress thread. Super excited as always. Woohoo! Starting a new project. I fell in love with Charlotte Jennings' personal work, and I felt like it would be a great piece for me to study in 3D. The composition and lighting are strong. I love the colors and hints at storytelling. Hopefully I can do these elements justice to translate it to 3D. That is awesome. For Whip Wednesday, if I still have time. But I'm struggling with the camera a bit. The stones leading to the foreground. I tried just splining it before, hand placed, but even that shows I have like double the stones that get the look. Oh, you removed them back again. Okay. Let's see. Is playing with the focal length the way to go, or do you have any other suggestions for that effect? Okay. So let's have a proper look at this then. Because I think honestly, like the focal length and like the distance that we have here is pretty solid, right? So we have this distance here and this distance here. They're both scaled differently, so it's going to look like a little bit different. Like that distance is pretty good. But I wouldn't necessarily want to adjust anything on the focal distance itself. The main thing that like immediately, or like somewhat immediately jumps out is just like how thick this building is compared to this building, right? Like that definitely helps. That definitely helps with the perception of that distortion a little bit, right? Onto the stones though. Let's see. It kind of looks like you have the stone path curving behind. And I think these circles is very deceptive here. But I think you actually go behind this. Because I think this is like a little path that continues like down to the right. We kind of have a path that leads that way. So that would be something to think about as well. So this thing, it would basically be in the foreground, and then you have a path going behind it. That way. But that's like a very clever tactic, right? Because what you want to do is this path, if you didn't have like anything blocking you from going off to the right, that's what literally would happen, right? Like we would visually like follow those lines and we'll be directed off of the page, right? Of the art. This thing sneakily is just blocking us from doing that. And it's also kind of at an angle, so that we're kind of forced that way. Very sneaky little stones that we have to deal with today. So yeah, I would definitely try that stone path again. For this path, I would honestly not even try to do splines, because that is like a technical thing that is going to overcomplicate the whole setup. I would honestly just model the cube, bevel it, slap it down, and then take it into Unreal, start scaling it up and down to kind of create like a very natural looking stone path. Because again, also if you do it with a spline, you have to have some repetition in like the, I mean, I guess you could kind of put them on a spline, but then I don't know. It kind of feels like you're overcomplicating the whole thing. Where if you just want to have, what is it? Like how many stones are we even dealing with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say 20 stones. You don't need splines really. In my opinion. So let's take some notes as we go along as well. So in general, to come back to the camera, I don't think it's an issue with the camera. I think it's a slight issue, like a minor issue with the proportions of the scene. Well, with the proportions of the the main building that we're focusing on, right? It feels chunkier than the one that is in the concept. So yeah. We're gonna slim down the building. Slim down the building. Throw in those rocks. Honestly, I kind of get a hint of maybe overcomplicating it or overthinking it a little bit. Usually, what I tend to do is anything is better than nothing. So just slap those rocks down. If you don't like them, but you don't necessarily know what to do with them, what I tend to do a lot is I just move on to something else until I kind of figure in my head, I kind of figure it out in my head what I need to do with it, and then I'll do it on the fly, right? It kind of is like a very like energetic way and like a very active way of like bouncing between multiple things, but you kind of want to have stuff in there rather than not in there, right? A common thing that I keep talking about is it's better to move at all than to like stand still, right? So throw in those rocks. And then see how you can fix it like later down the line, right? That would also be like perfect if we had a look at the rocks like on stream or like with other people. It would have been nice, right? Because then we have something to like visually look at. Cool. Let's see. I tried just planning it before I hand placed it, but even that shows I have like double the stones to get the look. So I think what's happening, especially with the stones, is that there's like some foreshortening that might also happen in the camera. So you might have to make them just a little bit longer as well, in your case. If it feels like really out of place, then it might also mean that the concept might be a little bit off as well, right? Let's see. And then just going forward, are there any tips on how to make the background look like it goes on forever, but it doesn't? So for this kind of effect, right? For this kind of effect, where you kind of have the very bright kind of pattern in the back, there's multiple ways that you can kind of do it. I would try to play around, first of all, with some volumetrics, some atmospheric fog, like some distance fog. I would see if you can kind of tweak the settings to have it become like a little bit brighter towards like the end. But what you can also do is you can kind of fake the effect as well. I would have, okay, we're gonna do a top-down view. So this is your scene. So this is the camera. This is the main building here, right? So this is the focal point. And then you kind of have like the rest of the scene. What I would do is kind of think about like an area like this, where this has a lot of tree canopies. Right? So tree canopies, they will cast shadow. And then from like a certain distance, you just have trees with like different kind of canopies to have them like less dense, and they let in more light. And that's also going to mean that like the background is going to be brighter than the foreground as well, right? So be very specific with like the what is it? The canopies that you use on the trees here, and then just have like different canopies like down at the back. And you can honestly literally use the same trees. What I would do, right, to test it, because usually what we want to do is we kind of want to test if it's going to work, to make sure that whatever we do art-wise when we're gonna put in like the time, and we're gonna make it look good, and we're gonna make it polished, all that kind of stuff, we want to make sure that the idea behind it works. In this case, what that means is I would try to make a quick tree, or I would even grab a tree that exists from Megascans or Megascans or Speed Tree or whatever you have available, right? Grab a simple tree. Don't even worry about the textures, right? Strip all the textures from it. We don't care about that. Make it like really simple. Have like a single material on there and just make it white. And maybe the alpha map for like the leaves, right? Like keep that one as well. But you kind of want to strip it down to its essentials. Then try to build out the foreground. See if you can kind of get the lighting to work there. And then see what you can do in terms of like reducing the amount of canopy on that tree. And the way that I would do it is I would literally select the entire canopy and then deselect random or select random in Blender if we're using that. And I would set that to like a low value and then flood fill it basically so that it selects like the whole group, well, the whole poly group. And then you can kind of reduce whatever you want. I don't know if I have like a quick example of that actually. I don't even know. Let me see. Let me see if I can give like a quick example. Oh my god, it's been a while since I opened Blender at home. Let's see if we can open anything. Makes a lot of sense what you're describing. Okay, that's good. I thought I was losing track of a lot of people there. Like usually when I try to explain like very technical things, usually goes off the rocks like pretty quickly. But yeah, you basically, in terms of like the whole workflow, that's basically how I test things, right? I try to get like the quickest, simplest like interpretation or asset or material or whatever to kind of test what I want to do. And then see if that works before we start investing like a whole bunch of time in actually making it look good. So that's the way that I would apply it. But yeah, so you would have like dense tree canopies here. And then you can have like different trees with like less dense canopies. Over there. As much planning as possible for sure, loading out lesson. Yeah. Man, that is such a tricky topic. Because there is something there about over planning, right? And like staying too long in the blockout phase and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh man, it's kind of trying to find a balance, but you have to define that balance for yourself. And the only way that you do that is by doing it more. And you do it more over time, you get better at like defining what you need to do for your personal project, right? Because for me, I'm not that great at planning. Like I barely do any planning. I just love doing stuff, right? So that's my method of doing things. Let's see here. Do I have like a quick tree actually? I don't think I have. Should have. Don't know where I put them though. Okay, we're not gonna bother with that. Let's see if I have like a different example here. I am just looking through my different medieval assets. So let's imagine here, super zoomed in Blender. But let's imagine here that this is like my tree canopy. It's a beautiful tree canopy. What I'll do is I'll go to, hold on, I need to switch for this. So I'll go to select, where is it? Select random. I'll set this to something like very low. Let's say 0.1 or something like that. Right? The issue with this is that if you do this on a canopy, we don't want to remove like individual like polys, right? We don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to flood it to the actual planes. I love your tree canopy. Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. But what we need to do now is we kind of need to flood that too, like the whole thing. And I just realized that my shit, my hotkey doesn't work. So how do we do this? Select linked and select all the linked stuff. And I usually do this on normal. And then you can see I have like a random collection now. And then once I create that, I can kind of start reducing things in like an asset. That's usually the way that I go about it. And then I can kind of do that multiple times to kind of get sparser things. Like tree canopies, for example. Like I do that stuff a lot. Or if you, let's say you scatter things on top of on a floor and you want to have like these nice debris, like scatter things. Sometimes they can get crazy in terms of like the amount of polys that you have. I do the same thing. I just, instead of like trying to like manually optimize it, I'll usually do like a very rough base pass, make like a duplicate so I have a backup, do a base pass, do the same thing there. Select random, flood fill everything, and then just delete like all the stuff that I got selected. So yeah. Quick little tip there. Yeah, with the rest of the things, I wouldn't bother with the splines like we talked about. Cool. Cool. Let's see. Was there anything else? Yeah, we kind of talked about the background. The background is basically going to be built up in stages because you're going to have to do a combination of like multiple things at the same time. So like the meshes in the canopy, reducing them could work. But also, I'm going to make a note for you. It's been ages since I used these myself. And I kind of forgot the official name. I'm gonna make a couple of them. There's these things that are called color correction zones or areas or probes or whatever, which is basically, imagine a volume for post-processing, but it's heavily simplified. And you can kind of select a radius and say like, hey, I want this area to be like more intense or less intense, or I want this to have like a different hue or a different color or whatever you want to do. Like you can kind of do that based on the volume inside of Unreal Engine as well. So all those things in conjunction are probably going to give you like a very good effect there. Cool. Yeah. Great choice of concept. Great little block out as well. I think it's perfect in scale. This is what I love about it as well. It is perfect in scale. The trees, you can kind of get away with doing like relatively simple stuff. You can do, you can do some like really simple sculpts, and then because you can't really see the canopies for the most part, you kind of get away with doing like, you don't have to make a full tree. You're just doing an interpretation of a tree, right? So you can kind of get away with stuff there, which is beautiful. Yeah. Best of luck. See ya. And thank you for posting your work as well. I appreciate it, as always. See, I was saying, I started up another block out, but as I started to block it out and realized that it was a lot and it was hard to solve in 3D, this one popped up and it was like, it looks so nice. Yeah, like, honestly, especially in a situation where you kind of need to get back into the routine, right? It is good to just have something small and something easy, because you want to give yourself a win in the beginning where you can kind of can pick things back up and be like, oh shit, yeah, I can still do this and I can still have fun with it and I still like doing this, instead of giving yourself basically a project that's going to set you up to fail, right? Because if you go like really big and you don't have that like raw motivational power for like months and months on end, yeah, It's a risky business. Really want to do that tight, polished corner? Yeah, do it. Do it. Do it. Okay. Huncho is coming up with some updates. So, first one is I made a story. In this world, people disappeared suddenly and the room was left untouched. It's a hard story to tell visually. But I mean, it can work, you know? It can work. You can allow people to basically come up with a story in their head, right? Because there is some sort of mystery there. So I don't really mind it. Added some stuff to the table, replaced all the walls and the floor with modded kits. It's good. Question: do you think that the materials work well together? Let's have a quick look. So we got some tiles. Well, we've got kitchen tile. We've got like this checker pattern on the floor. And then we got the herringbone pattern, like for the rest of it. My immediate gut instinct is that it kind of works, even though I kind of have like slight doubts about the combination of the wood floor and then like the tiled floor as well. So I guess that kind of goes to show like how much I know about like floors in like older apartments. That's really what this comes down to, right? Like I would say instead of asking me, ask your reference, right? If your reference says that like, hey, this is like a really common thing in a certain place at a certain time, that is awesome, right? That is all you need to know. And then you can kind of use that as like your validation of truth, right? But I guess you're kind of more asking me in sort of like an artistic sense. And I think in an artistic sense, it kind of has like a nice combination, right? The tiles work really well because you can look at like how dirty they are, especially for the kitchen. You can do some really cool stuff there, making it like gross and overgrown and all that kind of stuff. Not overgrown, but like moldy and stuff. And then the same thing you can do with like this nice polished wooden floor as well. You can do some cool stuff there. Yeah, Phil, that's exactly what they were going for as well. So yeah, One Show is definitely going to appreciate that as well. They showed some references from like the Silent Hill remake last week as well. So they'll definitely be happy to hear that. Yeah, overall, I think they'll work well. Nothing really to complain. Nothing really that like, ugh, I don't think this is gonna work for these materials, you know? Like no gut instincts feeling, so. So the materials, they work. That's a little check mark. But use reference. As your source of truth, right? I really need to do something about this pen because it's getting unreadable. And just in the meantime, we've got a couple more people joining in as well, so happy to have you. This is just basically a stream where I go through giving people feedback from our community. But if you have any questions about game development, environment art, all that kind of stuff, feel free to throw them in the chat and we can have a nice discussion about it. Let's see, so that was the first question. For the prop workflow, I plan to make most of the furniture and the props with a high to low poly workflow. And maybe the kitchen cabinet can be done with tiling textures. I'm aiming to create high quality and optimized assets. What do you think? High quality and optimized, like that can work regardless of which workflow you use, right? Would I do it with a different approach? Well, yeah, because I try to avoid like high to low poly like as best as I can. So I will. So let's be clear. This is not a recommendation, right? I think your choice of picking a couple of assets with the high to low poly workflow and then doing other assets in your scene with a different workflow is the best thing you can do. However, in my effort to avoid anything to do with like high to low poly and baking and all that kind of stuff, I will set up like a bunch of technical stuff so that I can avoid. Again, though, like your workflow and your choice of the workflow is good because I'm also looking at it from like a portfolio perspective too. That if you can show that you can do multiple workflows and that you can choose where you decide to apply them, right, and where it makes sense. So what I'll say there, to make sense, I would pick the assets. So pick the complex assets. That's going to be high to low poly, right? And then the rest of the more modular assets, or the things that don't necessarily need a whole bunch of unique detail, you can do them with tidables and then just dress them up with like decals and stuff, right? That's the simplest way that I would do it. I don't think you're going to need like any additional workflows. There's nothing too organic, so we don't need ZBrush. Yeah, so the rest of it makes sense. So I would potentially pick the TV. The TV could be really cool. Potentially the table, right? The reason why I picked the table is because it's in the focal point for this shot. And there's going to be stuff on it that is probably going to be done with high to low poly as well. Because that allows you to have a camera over here that is going to be like zoomed in on this area, right? So if you have a camera that is going to be focusing on this area, that could be like a good indication of, hey, this isn't like a high quality island. Let's call it, right? Because that would be nice, right? Like, I just want to emphasize that you don't have to do everything with the high to low poly workflow. And you know this yourself as well, right? I mean, you showed that off in your post too. But that you can kind of decide like how you can showcase your work by saying like, hey, this island over here, that's going to be like somewhat high quality assets. I'm going to do them like high to low poly, and I'm going to put more attention to detail in that because it is more important to the scene overall. And then with the rest of it, because we're not going to be zooming in on like a blank wall or something like that, we can then do some shortcuts there, right? Jazar is saying, look up how they join the two different materials on the floor in real life. Usually they have a metal strip in between it. Yeah, exactly. I think that would be really good to look into as well. Puns is coming in. It's good to see you, Puns. How are you doing? Definitely agreeing with Veil CG art here. Yeah, the lighting is so good. I really like it too. Very, very solid base of a scene already. But yeah, I'm doing good. Just having fun. It's been an okay week so far in terms of like the amount of stuff that needed to be done. So yeah, I'm feeling good overall, you know? Feeling good. And hello, Zoe. It's good to see you here as well. Welcome back. Let's see. Was there anything else in here? No, I think that was it. So there's no different approach that I would take. Sean Schumacher is saying the way that GPUs are getting, it would be better to just pack as many models into an 8K UV space. I would not do that. That is not something that is common in game engines. Not at all. What we are seeing more and more is that I do agree with the point that there are some situations where that might be helpful. Maybe this is, if this was an actual like an actual scene in the game, trying to think though. Because yeah, like drop and draw calls is not necessarily like a thing, like an issue here necessarily, right? Because it's a very small kind of environment, so we're not really that concerned about it. Yeah, it's more about like a more efficient use of like textures, because textures take up like a lot of space on your disk, and they need to be loaded in and all that kind of stuff, right? So having like a 1 AK texture, if you can somehow be like more optimized with like reusing it. Because it isn't calculating textures based on UV space, so if it was a topic. No, it's good. It's good. I'm just trying to think about it, right? Because it isn't it calculating textures based on UV space? I would stick to 4K. Yeah, I would not go above like 4K. Like that is not something that gets done in like games at all. So I've never. Yeah, no, I've never seen an AK map. Like ever. So yeah, the way that I would do this in like a game scenario is I would kind of do it the way that Juancho is setting it up. Deciding where to spend most of your time, try to make those assets individually as best looking as possible. Because one of the big benefits is if you make them separately, I can then go and use them in a different scene. Again, we're thinking about like the reusability of things, right? I can then use them in like a different scene, and then I don't have to load in like 90% of a texture that I'm not going to use because I just want like this single cup, right? That's like a really big benefit of not packing everything inside of like a 1K. So you'll usually see this when in the context of outsource, right? Like there's a lot of things that can be done more efficiently by properly packing them together, but for the sake of open worlds and how unreliable it might get in terms of like level art, right? So like the people that actually do the set dressing of like open world games, you will have to build some sort of what is the best word? Like redundancy into it, so that you don't have to rely on a level artist being like, oh, but this is like part of like this texture space, so I need to use all these things now. You want to give them the freedom to be like, hey, I want this cup, but I don't want this chair, right? That opens a lot of flexibility. And if you do it the opposite way around, where let's say you have a bunch of assets that are just like packed into like sets, you have to be like super careful with which ones you use. Again, not really that relevant to this specific environment specifically, but it is good to know like the game context surrounding it. Let's see, based on screen space, because there is, I think, something that you're hinting at, like based on the screen space, it makes sense, right? If this is like reliably, like let's say this is your entire game environment, it becomes less of an issue again, right? Because then I don't necessarily care if you stick it in like an 8K, even though like an 8K I wouldn't really recommend still. But like it doesn't matter if you just pack everything into like one thing, because if this is your game space, it's going to be loaded into memory at all times anyway. So yeah, from that perspective, you could kind of do it if this was like a single room kind of game. Yeah, it's a good thing to bring up though. It's an interesting discussion. Let's see. Vale is asking, or maybe bringing something up. So not so related, but in this kind of scene for really close-up detail, would it make sense to have a decal for dust through the debuffer, since it's hard to get pixel ratio in a baked texture? No, I think you can get it in like a baked texture. But I mean, you can use decals as well. Like 100%. You can use a combination of the two too, right? Like you can have like, let's say, like already some sort of dust built into your actual texture, and then have a decal that adds to that dust too. Because yeah, again, it's a whole modular approach to things, right? Like if you have a dust decal, you can then also use that on like a bunch of different assets too. Crafta is asking a quick question. First of all, thanks for coming in here, Crafta. Thank you for asking the question. Welcome to the chat. So less environments relate more props. Are models created for sub D ever utilized in games for something like a hero asset? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So models created with like a sub D workflow, are they ever utilized in games? For sure. Yeah. It just kind of depends on like what the best workflow is for specific areas, right? So for example, sub D is still like very popular in like weapons because you kind of want like the really clean topology there and the reliability, right? For other things, yeah, sub D still gets low poly. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm thinking about it in like the general workflow, right? But you're right that it still gets like low poly down anyway. If we're talking about like the actual thing, like is sub D straight up used in games? We always do like an optimization pass, right? So something that is like too high poly being straight up used in games is probably not the case. Unless you're now looking at Nanite, perhaps, right? But that is like somewhat of a different conversation. Craft is saying more in movies. If you want to do high to low bakes, I use sub D. Or if you want something that's going to be used in a close-up render, but then can be in actual gameplay. Yeah. That's a good point to bring up. Just from like a general perspective, the more important something is, and the closer that we get with the camera, the more attention to detail and usually the higher resolution and the higher poly count it becomes, right? So there's a difference between cinematic assets, for example. Like imagine a game where you can inspect like assets. Those assets usually have they might even have like a separate model specifically for those cinematics, and then as soon as you put them down, it kind of switches to the actual game model again. So there's a bunch of like really interesting stuff happening in games where that sort of like optimization gets taken into account as well. So yeah, I love that you bring that up, Sean. That's a great point. Yeah, no worries. Oh my god, you should see me type. Like I'm full of typos. Cool, but great little discussion. Yeah, if you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I would love to have these kind of things, even if you don't think it's relevant, right? Like drop it in there and we can chat about it. Thank you, Honcho, for posting your work. Let's have a look at the next one for today. That's Connor. Oh, this one. This one from Connor. Let's see. Connor B, sub D and engine for displacement maps, I guess. Not necessarily. I mean, it does help, right? Like if you're talking about, I mean, there's so many ways of looking at subdivision, right? Like if you're thinking about like a subdivision modifier to get like more polygons on your assets to get like a higher quality displacement in the engine, that could work. But then there's also things like parallax occlusion mapping, which is like very commonly used, because apart from using nanite, like having a lot of geometry where you actually like deform the actual geometry using like displacement maps and stuff, or tessellation, or what you want to do, is really expensive compared to what you can do with parallax occlusion mapping. So yeah, kind of depends on what you mean by that as well. Let's have a look. I always find myself being drawn to post-apocalyptic games and environments. The storytelling is inherent in the process. Made a little mysteries whispering from the garbage and decay, but this scene, I'm hoping to capture the vibe similar to Dead Island 2. Oh, okay. I've been playing a little bit of that like a couple of weeks ago. Subject is very loosely based on Victorian gardens in Central Park. Carousels are so visibly visually interesting and also very unsettling. I end up getting stuck on the idea of someone like a zombie getting chained to one and pulled around and around. My goal is to get better at sculpting by challenging myself with something rather ornate. I mean, if you want to sculpt like all the details on like a carousel, that is a huge challenge by itself. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, fucking go for it, you know? The carousels are freaky and warped. That is true. That is true. You can possibly get away with it. Also, the way that I'm thinking about it, like a carousel usually has like a couple of ornaments that are like interchangeable, right? So you could have like 2 ornaments. You just keep reusing them. So for example, if we're looking at this one here, sculpt this ornament, and then you can kind of just like keep reusing them. And if you're really smart, you can maybe break it up by having the interior say something different every time. Right? Yeah, exactly. Like, Connor, you're going the same direction as I'm going as well. So, that's pretty cool. But that's like a smart way of doing it. You kind of have set it up as well here. Yeah, that's great. I would like to get some feedback on the composition and the proportions of this block out. I've added fog and sunset because the number of emissive lights that would be on the carousel practically demands it. I would look into like mega lights for this. This could be like a fun exercise in like mega lights and seeing how that reacts. I will need a lot to balance, so a strong composition at the start will be the key. Cool. Well, okay, let me see. Yeah, I mean, so my gut feeling here is it's a cool idea, right? Really cool idea with the carousel. I like that you want to go for that. But I'm not too sure if you even need like this second part. Because honestly, what you could do is just be like, hey, I'm just gonna make like the sickest like carousel ever. Make like a bunch of like background terrain and really focus in on like the cool story that you kind of have going on here, right? Like focus on that. Because I feel like this is not really that relevant to the story, right? Because the way that I'm thinking about it is, okay, we kind of have the zombie that's attached to the carousels, getting dragged around. You see like the blood smears on the floor and all that cool stuff. But the zombie escapes and then goes into the tent. But like, there's no, it kind of feels like kind of empty in terms of like the impact of that happening, right? Because it's a post-apocalypse, so no one's in that tent anyway. So we don't really care about why they went there. There's no good reason for them to go there anyway, right? So yeah, that would be my recommendation from like a story perspective, that if you want to give that like a little bit more impact, that would be very interesting to do. But yeah. So that's why I'm saying, like, is that needed? Like, do we need that tent and do we need that secondary like point? Because honestly, you could just have the main carousel there and have that fully lit up and then have that cool story, and then maybe you can still do the same thing, right? You could still have like a blood smear kind of like trail kind of leading off to the side. And just leading away from something. That could still be cool. It doesn't need to be like inside of the tent. So it kind of, if you really think about it from like an emotional impact as well, is you don't necessarily want to have something creepy go into the light again, right? It would be so sick that we go from like the light of the carousel into the darkness, and we kind of don't know where that zombie went, right? Like the mystery behind it as well. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, cut it down. The Victorian gardens in real life is lowered in a valley thing, so it can make the walls in the background more. Yeah, I mean, you have like total freedom what you want to do with the background, right? Just in terms of, yeah, the tent. I mean, you could still even do the tent. I just don't think that like the zombie needs to go inside of the tent, right? You could still have the tent and all that kind of stuff for my liking. But it kind of seems like you kind of want us to focus there, but like it's yeah. Don't really know what the purpose of that would be. Like this blood trail going off. You can kind of have like some cool like sliding like trail kind of going on. So like because what was it, like 1 foot got lost or something like that, right? So you could have like one boot print and then just like a trail of just like I don't know, someone's bloody jeans getting scraped over the floor or something. That could be cool. So composition and proportions. We didn't really talk about that. I think it's okay. I would probably, what I would do is give it more space so that if we have like the view of the whole thing. Oh god. Oh no, I didn't grab a new layer. Oh well. Here we go. We'll deal with it. So I kind of want like the carousel to take up like a smaller amount of space compared to what it does now. Because as we're getting close to the frame, it feels very claustrophobic. Right? So giving it like a little bit more space to breathe and then looking at it from a distance, which also opens up like the possibility for a second screen where you can just be like, hey, I'm going to zoom in on the story, right? Which is going to be like this one over here. That's going to be cool. So that also means that the chain is going to be more subtle. It's going to be like slightly more hidden. And then as we zoom in, you kind of get to figure out the story, what happened there. That could be pretty sick. Let's see. So yeah, it needs like space to breathe, right? And then in terms of like the composition, you can even with the tent, right? Like what you could potentially do. Let's say it's like the back of the tent, right? So let's say we kind of have the tent here, blah 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 blah. It's probably going to be like way smaller. But let's pretend that that looks good. And then you kind of have like a trail that kind of just like goes behind the tent or something. Right? That we can kind of like follow it along. And then maybe instead of having like the full tent there, maybe the tent is like partially ripped up or something like that. Really sell that like post-apocalyptic feel, right? It's not a pristine tent. It's a tent that's like been ripped to pieces and it's all dark and like, I don't know, like kind of like unknown inside. And it's just like, ooh, I don't know what's going on there. So that could be potentially cool. Having them go behind it or inside of it, a ripped up tent would be cool. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Collapsed, yeah. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff. So there's probably going to be a lot of reference for like festivals that got hit by like a storm or something like that. You can see like collapsed tents and they just the silhouette of like a collapsed tent looks so freaky, right? It kind of looks so unnatural that that's going to really help with like selling the vibes of it as well. It's going to look sick. Yeah, and then you have like the detail shot to focus on the story itself, which is really good. I like that. That's gonna have like a beautiful impact as well. Because again, we're zooming. We're gonna go from zoomed out to like zoomed in, and we're kind of like revealing more of the story. Gonna be cool. So yeah, I do like doing clot sims. They're so satisfying. Yeah, I love simulating stuff in general. It's so satisfying. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your work, though. This is coming along nicely. A solid block out, solid idea behind it as well. And also, I like the way that you're approaching it, right? Like, it's like, hey, I wanted to do like a sculpting exercise, build a little story around it. being smart with the amount of stuff that you need to sculpt as well. So I think it's going to be good. Yeah. Thanks for posting your work, Connor. Appreciate it. Let's see what's happening in the chat here. Zoe was asking a question. Sorry for the delay, Joey. Zoe, sorry. What are your opinions on working based off a concept that has already been used for a game? For example, building an environment from a God of War concept. Sean is coming in here. Cloud sims have made me lose sleep. Yeah, I can get it. I can get it. I've mostly done like simple stuff, so I'm on the good side. If you want to do like actual cloth sims and have like characters like interact with them and like have them be that done efficiently, oh no way. Back to the question from Zoe though. So that's a good question. Based on one that has already been used for a game, my recommendation there would be to try to find one that hasn't been used for the game. So something that like during development came up, but they decided not to use it, because then you can kind of put your own spin on it and yeah, have a little bit more of like creative freedom when it comes to it, right? And also a big thing is that it doesn't 100%, it doesn't like 100% compare to the actual game, right? Because that is the thing that's going to happen whenever you try to create a scene that has already been done in the game. What you're basically trying to do is saying like, hey, I'm going to do this. And ideally, right? Like this is how people are going to look at it, is that it needs to be better than the game. And I think that is in a lot of cases, especially when you look at like the really high quality ones, that is going to be a tough sell. So my recommendation for that specifically, if we're talking about God of War, look through what they have available in terms of like concepts that might not even have been used and try to build something there. You're still going to struggle with the same kind of comparison that's going to happen, but there's not like a one-to-one comparison that people can make. Because then it becomes more about like your creative choices as well, right? Like how did you decide to interpret that concept? Because even if you... So when you recreate like a scene from the game, what happened there is that the artists that were working on it, they've made a whole bunch of creative decisions and they've made it in the way that they did because they think that was the best outcome of those decisions, right? So you come in and if you just try to recreate it, then you're not really adding to that conversation, right? If we call it a conversation. But if you do try to break away, then it has to be a really good decision of why you did so, right? So you kind of build this cage for yourself. That's why I would recommend going for like a different concept instead, if you can find it. I don't know how open they are. They have like an art book, so maybe there's some cool stuff in that there as well. I'm not too sure. Let's see. What was another question here? Yeah. There's some really cool discussions in here. I'm learning a lot as well. Daba, who did it? Oh, sorry. This is the work from who are Ethernet is better. That's their name. Thank you so much for sharing your work. We're gonna dive into it in a little bit. Have a great stream, Tim. Very, very knowledgeable. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for popping in here, eh? Always love to see your name pop up as well. Thanks for being here. In the real world, is it common for an environment artist to have to do technical art, model everything in the scene, create materials, and arrange the scene? No, that's not common, especially when it comes to like AAA development, which is most of my career, right? In the beginning, you could kind of argue that it wasn't like triple A. It was like double A coming up to triple A at some point. So there was more freedom, and we would do in my first development, for example, which was like Planet Coaster, Jurassic World, all that kind of stuff at Frontier. We had a lot more hats to wear. So we did create materials up until a certain point. We also modeled everything, and the technical art was basically like pretty simplified. On bigger developments, like it's really specialized. So there's some environment artists that kind of have like a technical bone in them, right? And they'll get to do technical art from time to time. They'll build like a tool, or they'll build like, I don't know, something that can be used in like a production environment, right? But that doesn't happen like too often. For example, the last things that I've been involved in was mostly focused on set dressing. So actually taking the assets that already exist and building the actual world with it. That is the stuff that I love to do. And it's more focused on, yeah, storytelling, set dressing, like making the world feel alive, like all that kind of stuff. So it's very uncommon in bigger developments to have as many hats to wear. But I can imagine that in like, let's say AA or like indie developers, you get to do a lot more, like a lot more variation within your work as well. Yeah, I don't really have like any experience in that particularly. Okay, let's move on to Ethernet's work. Let's have a look. So Ethernet is Better has made this beautiful scene. I like this shot. The way that we kind of have like the separation between like dark and light. And then also like the God rays coming in as well. Looks like really nice. Ethernet is Better. Are you here? Not sure actually. I'm not sure if they are. If you are, like, feel free to join me up on the stage as well if you wanted to. Yeah, really cool stuff. Like really, really nice first shot as well. I kind of like how you kind of go into the scene as well, right? You kind of have like a little road that kind of goes into it. It is nice. Let's have a look here. Let's zoom in a little bit. So we're kind of going for like a destroyed kind of feel, right? Like an abandoned / destroyed kind of feel. I think that can definitely be improved, especially because most of it still feels really straight, right? So we're gonna dive into what that means, but if you look at like actual decay and destruction, like in a setting like this, what you're gonna see is that instead of having like these planks super straight, it is gonna be like crooked on every sort of point, right? So this plank is probably gonna be bent down a little bit like that, and then you have like the supporting elements, like maybe one supporting element kind of broke off. Kind of have the other ones that are still standing, but maybe one of them is kind of like split in two. And it's by introducing more chaos to those shapes. So for example, this one here as well. Like that wood, because it's very moist, it's very damp in here. Like that wood is gonna be bending like crazy at a certain point. And maybe also it starts to split as well. Right, so, and that makes for like way more interesting like silhouettes as well. Where instead of having everything like really straight, we kind of have like more impressive silhouettes. So the same thing happens here. This stuff is going to be crooked. There's gonna be like one of these is gonna be missing. These planks are all gonna be like rotten and bent and all that kind of stuff. And the cool thing about this is that all this stuff that I'm saying right now, or like at least most of it, you don't have to do anything, right? You don't have to do anything new. You can just use the geometry that you have and just change the geometry. Right? Because you got all the components here. It's just about like changing them up and making them more destroyed and more born, right? Same thing with this share as well. Like really play. This has been like outside for like years. So really play on that aspect of like, yeah, this thing has seen better days. Like one of the legs is missing. Side of the couch is like slanting. This has been like pushed down over time just because it's so foul. It's like it's almost like rotten, right, at this point. But yeah, you can apply the same thing to like everything, right? Like the fabric here is probably going to be like destroyed. It's going to be ripped. And then, yeah, you can basically apply that to everything, right? Because straight, it makes things feel 3D. So you want to add it, like, I call it adding character to things. Like we kind of go, so to continue with the character references, since we're going on that track anyway, I don't know why, because I'm an environment artist, but yeah, to add character to things, you can kind of see it as in like, hey, we're just gonna T-pose. And then to actually add life to a character, that's when we're gonna like put in the animation and you kind of start adding the actual character into the thing, right? Rather than a T-pose or an A-pose. So now I feel like we're in the stage where everything is still like it's pristine and we need to go in and like really make everything crooked and destroyed and all that kind of stuff. And that just, yeah, everything, right? Like everything is just going to be crooked. Everything is going to be like off an angle. There's going to be like wooden planks everywhere because people tried to patch this up over time, but it didn't work. Yeah. Really try to include that in everything. The next thing is you have a fake light here. I would try to avoid fake lights unless you can make them either subtle enough, make them subtle enough, or have them what's the best way of saying it? Have them in context, right? So we got two options here. Make them subtle so that I can't notice that you actually added a light, or add them in context. What that means in context is that, oh, someone's still living here and they added like a little torchlight, right? That's like in context. And now we give purpose to the light that you kind of added, right? So yeah. Again, very cool scene. Like you can get a lot of mileage out of this. Like this little scene here. If you start damaging and breaking everything up, especially silhouettes, right? That's the most important part. Like that's gonna have a huge impact. Focus on those silhouettes and you're gonna be in a good spot. Same thing can happen here, right? Like the roof partially collapsed. Have a lot of impact. Side of the building. Make it crooked. Have stuff leaning. Cool. Yeah. Because overall, like, it's a really, really solid base, right? Like, the way that you kind of broke up this, like, that's going in a really good direction. Just once we start, like, breaking up, like, all the straight shapes, right? That's when it becomes, like, really interesting to kind of look at. Because then it's like, okay, we're going to support this with a couple of wooden beams because people tried to do that at some point. Vary up like the shapes of these guys. And even with like simple overpaints, right? You can do a lot of cool stuff here already. Gonna have a couple of broken stairs. They try to repair it with, because that's also another way to look at it, right? Like we're trying to tell like miniature stories, like the story of like, hey, they tried like a bunch of planks on here to kind of fix the deck. That's a mini story, right? That's a person, even in these shitty locations, they took a plank and they tried to like make something out of that plank, right? But yeah, overall, really cool stuff though. Like initial impact is going to be awesome. And I think overall it looks really great. Just by putting in those details, you're going to push it like the next mile. Let's see. I'm not sure, but I think you need to become a member for a review. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Daba. It is actually there. So yeah, if you want to become a member, like you mentioned as well, though, it is there is a huge queue, and also the like, to be honest, the queue was kind of fucked for like a long time as well. So the portfolio review queue, like we need to find a solution for that. Try to make it better. Because there was a lot of confusion. People seemed like missing out on the queue. There's some people that are still trying to ping me about it as well. But yeah, hopefully by the next session, we kind of have that all fixed, which is going to be next month. But yeah. Let's see. But yeah, thank you so much for pushing your work. Ethernet is better. This, again, looking solid. I like the way that you're working. So yeah, best of luck. Looking forward to the next update. Let's see, there was some other stuff in the chat as well. Video game development is saying, I'm interested in environment art, but I think it might be faster to build maybe 2 portfolios focused on one area. And I'm thinking of making a material art portfolio and a prop art portfolio. Okay. First of all, it's not going to be faster to make 2 portfolios compared to 1, right? Let's get that straight. Let's get that straight out of the door. It's not going to be faster because you're making 2 portfolios instead of 1, right? But I think what you mean is that you want to focus more on like one specific area, which you can do. But I would advise, so here's a tricky thing, right? With materials, there's a lot of competition. Because if you look at it from a broad perspective, materials are relatively easy to create. Comparatively, right? If you think about like becoming an environment artist and the stuff that you need to do to become an environment artist compared to a material art position, it's easier to get into a position where you are hireable with that specific of a skill set. But the reality of the industry is also that there's way less material artist positions than environment artists and level artists, right? Because you can crank out way more stuff in the same amount of time, right? So that also usually means that there's more people looking for those positions as well. So I would say that I don't have any like data on this, right? So I'm not supported by like any actual data, but material art is probably one of the heavily fought for positions, I think, because it is relatively easy to build up a portfolio. And that's what people will aim for, right? And that applies to like a bunch of stuff. Not only to game dev, but like if it's easier, there's going to be more people that will be trying to get into it, and there's more competition in that space. For prop art, it's less, right? Because you need more skills, and material art is kind of like a part of prop art. So you be picking up that skill regardless. So yeah, that is probably the the better one to go for from like a pure numbers perspective, right? But all that kind of stuff doesn't really matter, because what I want people to realize is that I want you to focus on what you want to do. Like, you're going to be doing this as like a job, 8 hours a day. You should be doing the things that you want to be doing, because that is not only going to be helpful on the job, but it's also going to be helpful in making and sustaining a career in games as well. So I would look at it through that lens. If you are undecided, that's fine, right? Like, just do a bunch of different things. And Sean is coming in with I will say though, there are material art positions outside of game development that I have got one. There are, yeah, but I think the same thing applies there too. I mean, it would be like the same thing can be said about like if you can become an environment artist, you can go into the movie industry as well, right? I know a bunch of people that like transitioned from doing environment art on a game project to then doing like environment art for like a live set, right? So there's a lot of overlap between the two, like regardless. And you can look at like product designing or like product visualization, architectural visualization. Like there's a bunch of stuff there too. So yeah, I mean, I think in general, like our skill sets, no matter what you're going to be doing in games, is going to be like relatively broader than people expect it to be. But yeah, that's the thing that I want to just get out there is I want you to kind of find like your North Star and kind of work towards that and see what aligns most with that. Because if you're going to make 2 separate portfolios, I think just make one and showcase both skills on one portfolio. This is my personal opinion. I don't really believe in having like separate portfolios. I think it's more about like the actual quality that you put on your portfolio that's gonna be determining if you get a job or not, right? It doesn't even matter necessarily what that is. For example, if you look at my, oh my god, I'm not saying that this is like high level, like high quality, especially not at this point, but my student portfolio, right? It had a lot of realistic stuff, and I got hired to work on like a stylized game, and I was mostly doing props where I wanted to do environments. So yeah, I mean, the games industry is like a little bit different now, but yeah, ideally you want to be in a position where you get hired for the job that you want. I really like environment art, but I'm learning with tutorials and courses I bought. I don't know if I'm going to make it. Are you having fun though? Yeah. I was kind of like preemptively gonna go the same direction as Sean. It will take time. Like, this will require patience, and it will require it sounds depressing, but like sacrifice, right? Like sacrifice in the way of like, hey, I'm doing stuff, and maybe not all that stuff is going to be relevant to your portfolio, so you don't want to show that off. I don't know, before I got into games, I have like a hard drive full of stuff that didn't make it on my portfolio because it was just like, hey, I want to play around with it. I want to see, maybe I'll give it a try, and then, it didn't work out. Okay, next thing. And just I have like, I call it my project graveyard, literally, because I have like maps just full of stuff that I never finished. So yeah, focus on the stuff in the moment. If you really like environment art, and if that is what you really want, and you want to get into the video games industry as fast as possible, focus on so let's assume that you're starting out like relatively in the beginning. Focus on props, move on to dioramas. That's it. Do it. Don't get carried away by making like full environments, right? Like what I would want you to do in that case is focus on smaller environments that tell a story. Because what I'm doing in my day-to-day job is I'm set dressing, right? But I'm trying to come up with like these stories like on a consistent basis. And that is really, really important. If you can tell a story, you're already further ahead than 90% of the other people. Props and dioramas, yep. So the reason why I'm saying props is because you learn all the skills that you need to learn to then go on and make the other things. What are dioramas? Oh, just like really small condensed scenes. Like usually they're a collection of like a couple of assets, like on a table or whatever. Like really small, compact scenes. I'm having a blast trying to recreate the materials created for the game Control. Really hard but rewarding and learning a lot. Yeah! So you love concrete, huh? That is awesome though, Thomas. They I remember they had this really cool blog post talking about like how they created like all the materials. Like I think it's from the substance blog, I think. It's from years ago though. Yeah, it might be interesting for you then. Quite a lot of concrete, yeah. Okay, so focusing on the beginning in props and dioramas, got it, thank you. Yep. Yeah, that's about it. That would be my recommended thing to do. And again, I'm gonna tell this now. Keep everything way smaller than you originally anticipated for. Because we usually start with like grand ideas and then kind of like scope gets in the way. And because this is what it really comes down to, right? If your goal is like, I want to get into the games industry as quick as possible, you have to do as many projects on a small timeline as possible. So you cannot get carried away by doing like multi-month big projects. That's why my recommendation would be, see, like I wouldn't even make bigger environments. If you want to get into the industry, if that is your real goal on a short timeline, don't make big scenes. Do not make big scenes. Oh yeah, Swan Boy is saying like a whole bunch of like good things as well. Is yeah, don't do big scenes. Don't do technically challenging scenes unless you want to become like a tech artist or something like that. Just focus on the stuff that you want to do, like the props and the stories and all that kind of stuff. But you don't need to make bigger scenes and environments. You can do that at a certain point, but I would recommend it if you've done like a multiple dioramas. Because again, it goes back to your question, right? I want to get into the industry as quick as I can. You should not be making big scenes. That's it. Sean is saying, I really don't want to discourage you, but the games industry is hard to get into. I know you want it fast, but I've been at this for years. Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I feel so you can make it. You can make it in a short amount of time. But man, you have to have all your ducks in a row. You can't get distracted. You have to get lucky. Like there's so many things that need to align. I wish you the best of luck, right? And I hope for the best. I really do. But yeah. One thing that I can guarantee is gonna take longer than you imagine it to be. And so true, I'm trying to break into the games industry, making a big scene, and it wasn't the greatest idea, which I had. Well, yeah, because the thing is like you're in the stage of learning as well, right? So let's say you work on like a project that takes 6 months and you make like a bunch of assets in the beginning and then you do like the scene and then you get back to those assets. Those assets are going to be outdated by the time that you get to the end of the scene, right? Because you're learning so much and you have like a better understanding on how to create art. So usually what you would want to do is before you get to that point and you start going on the treadmill, right? Because that's what I refer to it, and probably a bunch of other people too. You kind of want to avoid, well, being demotivated, getting on that content treadmill where you have to redo the things that you did in the beginning. So that means that you just have to do stuff within a certain timeline, which is like a month. Try to do something in a month. That's already going to be tricky enough. So I should only make smaller scenes and props or hero props forever on my portfolio. So if you're asking that question already, I feel like you're going to do you're gonna make bigger environments regardless. But if you ask me the question, I want to get into the games industry like the quickest way, you should only be doing that if you have like all the skills to make a big environment in a small amount of time. And that is tough because there's a lot that goes into it. Let's see. Stranger is saying, I've been trying for 2 years since I graduated to even get an interview. Yeah, it's also not a great time. That's not even sugarcoating that one. It's not great. Farian Blender. Lovely to see another Blender fan here. Hey dude, one question. Can I use 4K on Trimsheet? I mean, I've used them many times. Yeah, you can. You can. You totally can. This is the thing. Like, this is a rule that applies for like all game dev. If you can justify it, you can use it, right? Like a 4K map for the Trimsheet, if you reuse it like on a lot of stuff, it's not that big of a deal, right? It makes a lot of sense. I applied to about like 100 listings per month, and I just got an interview after 3 years. Haven't had a call back yet. Oh man, best of luck, people. Okay, since we're talking about that topic, then we are probably gonna do like one of like BE Unwrapped like on this in the future, because this is something that I get to talk to inside of the community a lot. Is you have to find a way to stand out from the crowd. And there's so many ways of doing that. But one of the ways that I did, or tried to do, I would go to like these obscure websites. I mean, this one is probably well known now, but it was called like Game Dev Map. And I would literally go to every single like dot on the map. I would click it and I would go to every individual company and I would see if they had like an opening. If they didn't, I would try to reach out to people anyway. And that is just like a lot of like very tedious work, because you're trying to figure out like, okay, this company, go to LinkedIn, who works there? Like, who can I reach out to? Do they have a recruiter? No? Okay, who do I reach out to then? Send an email, or like an email to the art director, for example. But oh, maybe they don't have like a public email, so how do I get that? Like, yeah, it'd be very tedious, but Game Dev Map. Yeah, I think honestly that's how I got my first job as well. And this was back in like 2016, right? 2016, I was doing that already, and I was literally just every single company that was on there, send them a message. Doesn't matter if you want to work there or not, you know, like at a certain point, like that was like my thing. I just wanted to get in. A lot of weird companies on there. Oh yeah. As the popularity of game dev like increased over the years, yeah, there's a lot of weird companies with weird stipulations and weird requests out there right now. Other side is saying, hi, I'm about to graduate after studying for 3 years to get into the games industry, and at this point it almost feels impossible. It's not impossible. You just have to keep going. It is persistence. I am surrounded by a lot of juniors in my team. People that got hired in the last year. There's a lot of them. There are a lot of them. You have to be out there. You have to be persistent. You have to keep marketing yourself, keep being visible, and then hopefully at some point, like they will see something and might reach out to you, or you reach out to them. You have to keep it up. And you can. Just one of the recommendations that I also give, we're going like full recommendation mode today, is don't spend all your time on looking for a job, because at a certain point you're just scraping the bottom of the barrel too, right? So at a certain point in the beginning of the job hunt, spend all your time on it. After a week or two, you kind of know where to look. You kind of have a routine set up. Do it for an hour a day or however you can, and then just try to shut it off and do more work. Because that will make a big impact. Even if like a company now cannot hire you, or for whatever reason you didn't make it through the hiring process, but they see that you're continually developing your skills, they might find that interesting when they are then looking for more people further down the line, right? And they'll keep tabs on that. Yeah. Soft skills over hard skills. Yeah, like it's soft skills, like other side is saying, networking, but making like impactful connections with the people around you. There's one invisible thing that I did when I was writing a blog when I started out. So I was already in the industry, but I was doing this, right? To basically build networks. I would have like a weekly blog. And it's still on ArtStation as well, so you can go and visit it. I would have a weekly blog, and on that blog I would like spell out what I was doing. So I had this like this network that would be looking at me, right? I would basically externalize like pressure so that I would have to do like every Thursday I would do a post. But one thing that I did on there as well is I would have like my weekly inspiration. But what was invisible is that I would reach out to those people as well. I would say, hey, thank you for being like an inspiration for me through all these years. I discovered your work through this. I've always been a big fan, and hopefully now I can get to like return the favor by including you in my blog, right? And it was just like, hey, if you don't like this, like just let me know and I'll remove you, but hopefully you don't mind. I've got a lot of like really interesting interactions there from like people. Nothing direct, right? Like you can't go into those conversations and expect a trade or something. You kind of have to assume that like nothing's going to come out of it, and then everything that you get is a surprise and it's going to be interesting. Yeah. Try to think outside the box, because everyone is on ArtStation jobs. Everyone is on like the most popular platforms. You kind of have to try and find a different way. I like LinkedIn because it's quick for anyone. Yeah. I think also a lot of movement is happening away from Twitter, where LinkedIn becomes like a more viable platform specific for artists as well. But all the recruiters and all the important people in game dev are on Twitter. On LinkedIn, sorry. Yeah. Yes, you gotta... It's so interesting, right? Because as inherently creative people, for the most of us, like we have to apply our creativity to like the job hunt as well, which we sometimes forget about, I feel. So yeah, think outside the box. Look into like new things that you can do. Like video game development was bringing up the topic of AI. I don't want to go too deep into that. But like you can use certain tools to kind of give you like a newsletter kind of style of just like, hey, find me like the latest openings, right? For junior positions specifically. And it can do that. Sometimes you kind of have to wrangle it a little bit, but it can probably come up with some interesting places that you've never looked at before. To just go on that topic a little bit more, video game development, will AI replace prop artists someday? Because of AI tools that can generate props faster than any artist could happen. It can happen. It's we're currently in this really interesting space where we have to see how valid AI tools are. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. I'm on the side that is like not convinced, even though I've been keeping up with like all the stuff that Nvidia is doing and all that kind of stuff. It's either like I'm not convinced in the short term, but on the long term, like who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen in 20 years? I mean, yeah. I don't know. I mean, if you really think about it, right? Like as a kid, we grew up and we played games and we were like, oh my God, graphics are never gonna get better. Look at us now, you know? So we kind of have a hard time imagining what the future is gonna be. Hey, Vale, thank you so much for being here though. Like, I appreciate it. It was great to hang out with you too. Cool. That being said, we do have to jump into some more feedback though. We have the next one from Paulina. Paulina, and it's a first time sharing, I think. So thank you so much for doing that, Paulina. I really appreciate it. And this is a final bachelor project for college. I have the entire semester to work on it. I'm creating a 3D game-ready environment based on historical Ukrainian houses. Oh, okay, okay. We're getting some Stalker 2 vibes over here. I like it. Let's see. Where's a question in here? There's a whole bunch of context, which is like really nice. Right, let me see if I can pick out the question. Hey, Sean, thank you so much for the sub as well. That is awesome. Yeah, that's me. So excited to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome to have you. If you are comfortable with it, you can join me on stage as well. If you like, I'm in the Discord right now in the event room. So if you want to jump in, hop on, and talk about your work. But if you're not comfortable with that, that's totally fine as well. The opportunity is there if you want to. So far, I'm thinking about including textures for the clay roof, the interior wall, exterior walls, interior beams, the base for the header. I was wondering if anyone has any advice on how to better plan the placement of these textures on the trim sheet. Okay, so we're talking about like trim sheet creation. We do have a really cool document though on trim sheet creation on our website that I'm just gonna post over here, which is kind of a little bit hidden, but that would be like really helpful for you as well and for other people too. Let's see. So here you go. There's the link for people that are interested. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say backstage today. That's all good. No worries. The main question is if there's anything to improve with the composition and how to plan a trim sheet. Okay, so for planning a trim sheet, I'm gonna keep it like very light, and I'm gonna refer you to that document that I just shared. Feel free to have a look at that first. But yeah, when it comes to planning, first we need to know what we want to add and the sizes of things that we need to add, right? The sizes are important because we might have to create like multiple instances of a trim, right? Where do I have some like empty space? I'm gonna eat some of these. So let's say this is our little trim. What we kind of want to figure out first, if we take it from like a broad perspective, is you mentioned a couple of materials, right? Like how are we going to split that up? So let's say, what was it again? Let me see. Clay floor, interior walls, interior beams, exterior beams, and the base of the hat. Okay, so already there, I would strip out. I would only create like a trim sheet for things that are. What would be the delineation there? For things that are not necessarily going to be used as like a tileable, right? Because for example, the walls I would do as a tileable because they're like bigger surfaces, right? We're not going to have like a huge effect if we try to add them on like trim sheets. So the clay, what was it? The clay roof, I think, right? No, the clay floor. So the clay floor for the pantry, that's going to be like a different room, I guess. That will be like a tileable. Again, I'm thinking about like reusability if you're thinking about it from like a planning perspective for a bigger environment, right? Because what is going to happen is that we make a trim sheet. If we add all these materials in it, that's going to make a trim sheet again like very specific to that house with those dimensions, right? Because let's say, oh, we have a house with a bigger clay floor, then we need to add more cuts into geometry to to add more patches of that trim sheet, right? So we kind of want to avoid that, and we kind of want to just give us like the more flexibility instead of like a tile for it as well. Same thing for, what was it? So walls and floors, right? We're going to keep it like pretty simple. Those are all going to be tiles. Tileable textures, right? Oh my god, I can't write. Tileable textures. And that means that we are left with beams, right? Beams, interior, exterior beams, and then the base of the hata. I'm not sure. That's probably just going to be the floors. That's going to be tileable as well. So most of it is just going to be wood, right? So that simplifies the whole process, because usually what I try to do, if I can, this is more like an optional thing, but I try to keep my trim sheets basically delegated to a singular texture, or like a single material. It just makes it easier, because once you start blending materials, right? Let's say we have gold, wood, and we have stone on this trim sheet. That means that we're limiting the reusability of a trim sheet in other pieces of the environment again, right? So the more that we try to like separate them out, the better it is from like a usability perspective. So that means that now we just need to figure out what the dimensions are going to be, right? So I saw that you mentioned beams, but there's going to be some other elements in the scene as well that can be helpful. So let's start out with the beams. So you want to have like a couple of thick boys. And that depends on like how many beams you have and like how much variation you want, right? And the way that you decide like how you can go with like a very technical way of doing this. But the way that you decide like how much space you give them depends on your textile density, for which we also have a guide, which I'm not really going to go into because that is like really technical and somewhat dry to talk about. But define like the amount of beams that you want to have, right? These are going to be the bigger ones. And then you probably want to have like some smaller ones as well for smaller beams, and maybe like the size of shelves as well. I think I saw some shelves in there. Because what we don't want to do, let's say we have this one right here for your beams, and then this is for smaller stuff, and then this is for like shelves, right? We don't want to scale up or down a texture too much, because then we're going to introduce stretching, right? So that's why we're creating like different dimensions here as well, which again, textile density will elaborate on as well. So that means we have a couple of beams, and then we have, let's say, smaller beams, right? So you got this thick beam. The thick beam could potentially be reused for these smaller beams because the difference between them is not that big, so we can kind of get away with it. But then, for example, you can use that trim sheet on like a bedpost, right? And that bedpost is like really slim. Or, for example, we have these shelves here. Those are going to be made out of wood too. So we can all use like one trim sheet for like all this stuff that I'm kind of seeing. And just reuse as much as we can. I'll give you an example here of a trim sheet. See if I can find it. This is my personal project that I've been working on for like quite a while. I haven't worked on it like recently, but just to give you an example of like how far and wide you can kind of go with it. If you have a look at this scene, everything that is made out of wood, you can make with a trim sheet. These chests, that's all single trim sheet. These like market stalls, that's all single trim sheet. Oh my god, I keep trying to drag it. No. Let's see. Oh my god, there's so many windows open at the same time. There we go. So all these little like support beams, yeah, basically anything that's wood is made with that single trim sheet. And I've built like props, buildings, like anything. Especially between the inside and the outside beams and the props. Yeah, so talking about the inside and the outside of the beams, right? If you want to have a variation there, you could still use that base trim sheet and then just add like a layer onto it, right? In that layer, you can add that in like multiple different ways. So you can do that in Substance Painter, right? You just make like a new texture that has the same layout, and then you can just swap it out on the model if you wanted to. Or you can do that in Unreal as well. The easiest thing is just making like, you basically at a point where you say like, hey, my wooden trim sheet is done. I now want to have like painted wooden beams. You just duplicate the Substance Painter file, or you just have like a paint layer or something like that on top of it, and you just export it as like a new texture set, and you have painted beams. And if they use the same layout, you can literally replace it like with a material in the engine. So it's really flexible. Yeah, cool. But that's pretty much it. Like I said, there's going to be like more information between the documentation that I sent, right? So feel free to dive into that as well. But there was another question. And anything to improve with the composition. So I mean, the composition here, very basic, right? It is just, I mean, it's supposed to be basic, I think. It is just a house in the middle of like an empty field at the moment, right? So that can definitely, you can definitely have, you can definitely do like way better in the composition, but I'm assuming that that is just based on how far you are in the project, right? Yeah, that's cool. And the way that this is set up, right? So because we talked about the tidables, the trim sheets, all that kind of stuff, that means that you have a lot of flexibility in terms of new buildings that you want to build, or if you want to make props or anything like that, right? If you want to have multiple buildings and stuff. So yeah, I'll say a best of luck, Paulina. Thank you so much for posting your work as well. Like, this is going to be a cool project though. I played a lot of Stalker last year, so that was really cool to see. A lot of inspiration for you there as well. My main focus is in the interior on this project. Oh, okay. Got it. In that case, like the composition, like these shots, they look like pretty interesting. Do something. Think about the story. Right? We said it before, but I do want you to think about like a story that you could tell. I'm imagining that the story in this house is going to be like very, what's the word? Very mundane. It's going to be very much about how simple life used to be, right? And how the simple things matter to people. So you can play a lot with like really cool contrasts of, hey, they live in this house that is like a very old kind of type of house, and they don't have a lot of stuff, but maybe they do have like this heirloom that they got from like their grandparents, and maybe one of them just passed away or something like that. And you can kind of build a story around the contrast between how simple life is, but then they hang on to these like very special things that are super unique to them. Just an idea, right? Could be cool. It kind of makes it personal as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be personal to you, but like relatable, I guess. But yeah, cool stuff, Paulina. Really, really cool stuff. I love all the research that you've done, even though I removed like 2 of the purists, but like this stuff is super cool. Like all the diagrams, like I can tell you're really, really nerding out, and I love to see like all these specific like diagrams about like how the doors look like and stuff. So that's awesome. Yeah, best of luck, Paulina. And thanks again. Sean is saying, if you make it in Designer 2, you can have switches and parameters, and you that will move over to Unreal. Yeah, I mean, you can use that, but I don't know if they improved on the system, like of having parameters in Unreal, but it's always so slow or so annoying, and you have to be like pretty cautious. But it is there though. it is a system that you could potentially explore. I just love how quick Designer is, and it doesn't feel like that anymore as soon as you bring it into Unreal and you have like all the parameters and stuff. Ugh. I'm a speedy boy, you know. I like speed, so anything that slows this down, I'm just like, yeah. Okay, cool. We're gonna dive into the last person for today. Vic is currently working on an environment based on a concept by Ashwin Swaminathan. That is cool. So we have the concept over here from Ashwin. Okay. A kind of gruesome guy, and this is definitely going to affect like the age rating of the stream. So thank you for that, Vic. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it probably will, but I don't care about that. Let's have a look. I'm currently researching and exploring workflows. Because my first environment project was a mess. It lacked in structure. This time I'm trying to be more organized. My plan was to try the layered RGB method for the wood, a plank material, and use displacement. Use displacement? Why? I'm not sure where the displacement part comes in. Because you don't really need displacement for this. So we got base wood, torn wood, moss and grime plus modularity. But I'm confused if I want to go down this route or not. I can't decide how I want to do it. Should I model the planks in? Question mark. Okay, so let's break this down, right? Like we had a really good example from Paulina just now. Basically about the same thing, right? Not about the same question, but the same content, right? Like the content that she was trying to create was a lot of wooden stuff, right? So what you want to do is just create like a trim sheet. Don't overly complicate things for yourself. Just start with a trim sheet, step 1. And then reevaluate the scene. Honestly, like, if you are starting out from a point where a previous project has failed because you kind of overscoped, you didn't really know what you wanted to do, you got to be able to bring it back to the stuff that you either don't know how to do, and you kind of have to do some experimentation, or you have to rely on the skills that you have and have worked. So in this case, I think it's a case of, okay, let's shrink it down to what are the components that I need, and we're just going to build them up like one by one. So a trim sheet would be the first one. Honestly, for a lot of the things, I know that like RGB and like the layered masking and all that kind of stuff is really in, right? I do it myself as well in that personal project that you saw. If you really want to keep things simple, go with a trim sheet and go with decals. The reason why is it gets rid of all the technical hassle that you have to do, because yeah, you have to set up a lot of like layer blending and all that kind of stuff to make those masks, and how are you gonna get those masks as well? That's gonna be a huge question. If you really want to simplify the whole process and you want to make it simple for you, do trim sheets and you add decals on top of it. That's it. Keep it simple. That has worked for the longest time. I think it's only recently that people started to discover that you can do like the masking and all that kind of stuff, but I would say it's not required because it's such like a technical hassle to set it up. Yeah. So we kind of glanced over it, but there's a lot of questions there already. Then you mentioned displacement. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know where displacement would come in. Displacement, I got a question mark here. I'm not too sure. I think you can just like remove that because that's not a part of the plan. Like displacement to me is more like an additional thing that you can do to make your project potentially look better. But displacement, if you're talking about like actual geometry displacement, you're not going to need that for the wood that you want to make. So you could potentially look into POM. But I don't think you're gonna need that necessarily. Let's see. What was the other thing as well? You got moss and grime. You can do that with some relatively simple meshes and then decals. If you want to have like some actual silhouettes, you can make some cool looking moss. So yeah, decals. We kind of covered that already, so that's gonna be good. So yeah, what I'm trying to do with this, it's like a thought exercise on like really simplifying the workflow, right? Because I didn't actually have a look at like your previous project. Let's have a look here. Yeah, doesn't look too bad. I mean, if you say that you failed on a project, like this is not like the image that I was expecting. So this looks quite nice. What did you struggle with then? Was a mess. It lacked in structure. This time I'm trying to be more efficient and organized. Okay, so you could potentially try like the RGB layered method, but a couple of questions, right? So you want to go for RGB method. A couple of questions. First one, masks. How do you create them? Right, like how do you generate your masks? The stereotypical thing is to do it in like Substance Painter, right? You just bring it in, you create like a second UV, you generate your mask in whatever way, and then you export that as like a channel packed texture, right? That to me feels like a very cumbersome way of working. It always did, even though like it's embedded in like pipelines, right? There are options there too, but they kind of come with like their own drawbacks as well. If you look at one of the recent demos that they did, or like recent talks from GDC, from the Quixel team, basically outlines the workflow that I was using on my medieval project, because I would not have masks. I would store that information in the vertex data of the actual models themselves. And I would bake my textures inside of Unreal, which gave like a lot of flexibility and like reduced like iteration time, because I didn't need Substance Painter anymore. Plus also not juggling with like a bunch of textures, and if I want to create like a new variation, I needed to go back, blah, blah, blah. Reduced iteration time like massively. However, you're storing all that data in like vertex painting, which means that if you're gonna have like any sort of like lot transition, it's gonna like fuck up like your vertex paint as well. So that's something to be aware of. For a personal project, I don't think you're gonna care about that much. That is just something to be aware of like a project perspective. Vertex paint is actually really cheap. That's one of the reasons why they did it, actually, because they were trying to do like a hyper realistic, well, a realistic scene that could be shared within Unreal, within Fortnite specifically. You completely replace Substance Painter with Vertex Paint. Yep, I did. But I mean, you're probably overestimating, like because you are giving something up, right? Whenever you do like a trade-off like that, you are giving something up where I didn't have that much control over my mask. So the way that I would control my mask was by working with the materials inside of Unreal instead. So I would like change them in the instances. Where like with a mask, you do have like a lot more control. I'll see if I can find the talk, because that was like a really interesting talk. It was featured on ArtStation as well. I always thought that it was expensive to go with Vertex Paint. Nice to know. No, because like you're storing the data inside of the mesh, right? I mean, so it makes the mesh more expensive, but comparing it to the actual memory data that you need to load in like texture sets, which is like what RGB does, right? You need like a lot of like texture sets. you can optimize them in like very different ways because you don't need the same resolution as like your base texture, but that's beside the point. But that is usually like the biggest impact on a project, right? Like the amount of textures like just increases the amount of memory that you need, both to like store it on your drives, but also to get it rendered as well, right? Because it needs to load it in, it needs to be in memory, all that kind of stuff. Let me see. Where can I find it again? Ooh. There we go. It was called Unreal Engine for Fortnite Talisman. So let me switch it over here. Can you still bring in an alpha mask to use with Vertex Paint? Well, basically, what I would do is I would create my mask inside of Unreal, right? So the whole point for me was to try to avoid having to bring in an external alpha mask. But they kind of do the same thing here. They have like a bunch of really cool stuff. Let's see, was this a talk? No, I think the talk was linked in here. Where was the talk? There we go. So let me link that in here, then we can quickly discuss it as well. There's the link. Let's see. So let me see.
In a modular way, building versatile assets like these that can be creatively repurposed for a variety of uses.
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
so this was their goal, right? Like the goal with this whole thing was, hey, we want to create like a demo that fits into like an Unreal Engine for Fortnite level. That's what they wanted to achieve. And they're making a comparison here where like a single asset from like their other demo, like the Electric Dreams demo that they did here, that's on the screen. A single asset already took up like more than 350 megabytes. But the entire
which
project
in turn brings in mind
could only take up 200 megabytes, or I think 400 megabytes in total, but that's what their entire environment took up instead. So that means that they couldn't have like a bunch of textures because that would like bloat that entire budget as well. So the way that they did that is, yeah, by doing the same thing that I was doing on my personal project. So they kind of talk about it here, right? This is basically an overview of like, hey, this is like RGB mask, like this is, we channel pack them. And then here they
built
just say like,
specifically with clean vertex color data in mind. This
yeah, like making use of the vertex data. So instead of storing it in like external or like in textures, they would just store it inside of the actual geometry as well. So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. That is probably also why they didn't go for like a full open world, but like a small spaceship. Because if you really think about it, like the whole issue that I brought up is if you store something in vertex color, right? As soon as you have like a level of detail transition, as soon as you go like a further distance away, and you go to like a lower LOD, it fucks up the geometry, right? So that also fucks up the vertex color. So that means that if you're on a spaceship, you have tight corridors, and you, most of the time, you are not going to notice because you're pretty much like close distance to like a lot of stuff regardless, right? So I thought that, I'm not sure why they picked that, right? But that's my assumption of why they picked like an interior for like a spaceship.
ID map in our blue channel, which we can use to offset masks and tiling values. So
Yeah.
just with that, we now store the basic building blocks for texture authoring directly in our meshes, at least in a rudimentary form,
Yep.
but at a fraction of the cost of storing them.
So that was like really cool to look into. But yeah, feel free to check out the link. That was really, really interesting. As you can tell, I skipped over like all the character stuff because I was like, oh cool. Skip all of it. So that would be like a cool talk to look into. But let's quickly finish off with the feedback here. Let's see. Oh, I think Vic actually brings up this point. Actually, I didn't read that far. They used vertex blending. Oh, but this is just vertex painting. Yeah, 100% go for vertex painting. For this stuff in the hierarchy of like complexity, right? So if you're thinking about keeping things simple, do trim sheets, decals, or vertex painting. Like all of those like iterations or implementations are like super simple to set up. So I would recommend going with those rather than going with like an RGB layered approach, because that makes it like more technically complex. So yeah, and you can combine the two, right? Like you could have your base trim sheet, then do vertex painting with whatever texture you want to do, because you could have clean planks and you could have dirty planks and you could have them blended together with vertex painting, right? So that's like a very flexible system again. So that's what I would approach this this environment with. Just yeah. I would, in my personal opinion, I would kind of forget about like the really complex, like layered setup stuff, and I would just keep it to the more approachable things. Yeah. Thanks for asking the question, Vic. Good choice of concept art as well. I like it. I like to see it. Yeah. Thanks for posting, Vic. We're gonna be switching it back to the camera, and then we're gonna round it off with like a single question. Maybe another one. We'll see if we get one more. But video game development is asking, I live in Portugal, but I really would like to work for a big video game company studio like Naughty Dog Creative Assembly. What's your advice to get a chance to work on other countries? Honestly, the best advice is make good work. It sounds so stupid, but like that's the way that you're gonna get in. The only caveat is if you want to get to like Naughty Dog, you would have to get a bachelor. If you really want to shortcut that whole green card system to get into the US as like a skilled worker, you would need a bachelor degree. I mean, you don't need it, but from people that I talked to that were in that position, they were close to getting hired by an American company. And the reason why they couldn't was because they didn't have a bachelor and they didn't have enough work experience to equal a bachelor. In their specific case, I only know one person like this. In their specific case, what they needed to do was they needed to have 3 years of work experience per equivalent year of studies. So that meant that, yeah, bachelor degree is 3 years. So that means that they needed 9 years of professional experience before they could be considered for a skilled worker visa or whatever it's called, like the equivalent for like the US. And I don't think they're going to be hiring remotely. I don't think they do that. So it kind of depends on country per country, right? For Creative Assembly, it kind of works like a little bit different. Well, does it? I don't think it does anymore. Fuck yeah, they just changed. They just changed like all the rules though. Like the big rule that they changed was in the UK as well. They upped the barrier for skilled worker visas from 24,000 a year to 38,000 a year or something like that, I think. So that means, I'm gonna be straight up, like as a junior or like as an intermediate, you're not gonna see those salaries. Maybe as an intermediate, potentially, but as a junior, probably not. Which kind of sucks. It fucking sucks. I don't think like companies are gonna like hire juniors for 38k upwards either. I don't think that's gonna happen. Sean is afraid that I won't get hired because I don't have a degree, completely self-taught, and no official work experience. Well, here's the thing, right? Like in the hierarchy of how important or the importance of things that you can do to like influence like if you get a job or not, your work is still at number one by far. The first time that they asked about my degree was like in my current job, and I started that job like 9 months ago. That's the first time that I ever got asked about my degree. Otherwise, I didn't care. So if you're in the case of like you're living in Portugal and you're looking for a place, it's gonna take a while. You can get to Creative Assembly, you can get to Naughty Dog, but it's not gonna be your first job. Or it's yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be your first job, straight up. Because there's so much red tape now that the companies, even if they want to hire you, so the way that it might work is if they hire you remotely, right? Because then that would be a way to like circumvent like the skilled worker visa applications that you need to do. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, the work is still going to be the most relevant though. Keep making good work, and if you keep building yourself up, you're gonna get to a place where it's hard for companies to ignore you. They kind of want to have you on the team if you keep producing good work and if you keep putting yourself out there. That happens naturally. It does take time. It does take time, and you have to be objective, and you have to keep pushing yourself, and yeah. At this point, I feel like I'm going to finish my game before I get hired. Yeah. I mean, look, that's another thing there, right? Like if you're actually working on a game, I don't know if it was a joke or not, but like if you're actually working on a game, that also means that you're spending less time devoting on your portfolio too, right? And I'm not saying that as like, oh, it's a good or bad thing, right? It's just a choice that we get to make in life, and we prioritize things for ourselves, right? But that does mean that like other things get deprioritized for us. Because yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so many factors to it, right? Because it's you only get like this one life, right? You gotta make the most of it. This is true. Back to you. Not make large scenes. Yeah. I mean, look, yeah, like I said, there's nothing necessarily bad with it, right? It's just being conscious about the choices that you get to make in life, and like if you're okay with them. But yeah, I think that's enough for this edition. It was actually really lovely to have such an engagement chat today, so I really appreciate it. Maybe we'll do one more, because we just had like one last one coming in. I'm a bit behind on the live stream, but I have a bachelor in design communication. It is graphic design mostly, but we did touch on 3D. Does it have to be in 3D? I don't think so. I don't think like the actual... Well, I'm actually not sure. I'm not sure for the US. But what usually happens, and this is stupid, right? Like this kind of shows like how far like governments and I don't know, the bureaucracy kind of lags behind sometimes. I think generally as like a game artist, you are under the graphic design bracket anyway. So it doesn't even matter if you're a graphic designer or an environment artist by trade, you get lumped into the same category. Like I said, I don't know how that is for the US, but it's definitely like that for the UK. Yeah. So I guess it doesn't have to be, which is good. Okay, cool. Thanks so much for your time, people. It was lovely hanging out with all of you. Yeah. Like other people mentioned, if you want to become a member, there's a link in the chat down below. Go check out all our cool workshops and all that kind of stuff if you want to learn more. Yeah, but I would love to see like more members. It's always lovely to hang around with people during the week as well. Yeah, go check out all that good stuff. If not, I will happily see you next week. Yeah, I think that's the earliest stream that we have. So next week we'll be back for more feedback and more casual chats. So I'll see you then. Have a good evening.